3 years ago, I took a job at a small museum in rural Ohio. I was 32 and fresh out of college with a degree in anthropology. I felt excited to finally dive into history. The museum was old and creaky, sitting alone near endless cornfields. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, and the dim lighting made everything feel eerie. Even though I was surrounded by history, I often felt isolated. As I settled into my role, I began organizing displays. One day, I discovered a locked storage room in the attic. My curiosity got the better of me, and I searched for the key. When I finally unlocked that door, my heart raced. Inside, I found odd artifacts I hadn't seen before. They all felt strange, but one caught my eye. A wooden totem covered in symbols. It felt like it was watching me. I hesitated, but couldn't resist running my fingers over the grooves of the wood. That night, everything changed. I had a nightmare. A dark figure reached for me in the shadows, and I woke up feeling cold. My heart pounded in my chest. I thought it was just stress, starting a new job, but the nightmares kept coming, growing clearer each time. I saw visions tied to that totem. They felt too real to ignore. Was I imagining things? I wasn't sure. At work, things got weirder. The lights flickered often, and I heard footsteps in the empty halls. Sometimes it felt like someone else was there. Shadows seemed to slip away just as I turned to look. I often felt an uncomfortable chill behind me. I told myself it was my imagination, but it felt like something wanted to be recognized. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of that totem again. The pull was strong, like it was begging for something. I can't explain what happened next. I heard a whisper, soft but clear, right in my ear. My skin crawled. I was alone, or so I thought. I tried to step back, my heart racing. Was I losing my mind? I couldn't bring myself to leave. The last straw came when I saw the figure from my dreams. It stood in the storage room doorway, cloaked in darkness. It didn't move. I asked if it was okay, but there was no response. It just watched me. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, but then I turned to run when I felt a cold breath against my neck. I don't remember how I got out of that room, but I never went back. Now, I wonder what that totem really was. What did I disturb that day? Maybe there's a piece of that museum still with me, haunting me when I least expect it. I still feel uneasy thinking about it. The following week passed in a haze. I kept away from that storage room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. The museum felt different now. The whispers never left my mind, and every creak of the building sent my heart racing. It was oppressive, like the damp air in the attic was squeezing the breath from my lungs. One evening, after all the visitors had gone, I decided to go through some old files in the office. I needed a distraction. As I sorted through papers, I stumbled upon a dusty journal buried beneath old museum reports. The cover was worn, and the pages yellowed, but the handwriting was surprisingly neat. I opened it, curious. The entries dated back decades, filled with notes about artifact acquisitions and descriptions of exhibits. My heart raced when I spotted a mention of the very totem that had haunted my dreams. My fingers skimmed the pages, searching for more. One entry caught my eye. It described the totem as a vessel of the past, a guardian of secrets. The author warned future curators to handle it with care, stating that it could stir those who have long been forgotten. I shivered at the implications. What had I awakened? I continued reading, and a chilling realization settled in. The last entry abruptly ended mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted. I ran my fingers over the ink, feeling a heaviness in my chest. I had a nagging fear that I was meant to understand more. That's when the lights flickered. The overhead bulbs dimmed, and I felt the air grow colder. I stood up, heart racing. The museum was silent, but something in my gut told me I was not alone. Then I heard it. the faint sound of breathing right behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. The chill on my skin deepened, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to thicken. I could almost see shapes moving just beyond my line of sight. Panic flooded me. I grabbed the journal and dashed down the hall toward the exit, determined to escape the oppressive darkness closing in around me. Just as I reached the front door, I stopped. There, against the fading light of the evening, stood a figure. Dressed in tattered clothing, it gazed at me with hollow eyes. My breath caught in my throat. The figure's lip curled up in what I could only describe as a knowing smile. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I couldn't look away, as it seemed to beckon me closer. I could hear its raspy voice whispering, but every word was a jumble. Sensing I was in danger, I snapped back to my senses and stumbled backward, colliding with a display case. Glass shattered around me, and the rattle of the remnants echoed like thunder through the hall. In the chaos, I looked up, ready to confront whatever this was, but the figure had vanished. Now my heart pounded anew, thrumming against my chest. I knew I had to uncover what I had disturbed. I couldn't let whatever that was stay buried any longer, even if it might destroy me. The next day, with the journal clutched tightly in my hands, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread weighing down my every step. I arrived at the museum early, hoping to sort through the chaos I had left behind. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what had happened. I kept replaying that moment, the figure's smile, the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to enjoy my fear, multiplying in the corners of the hall. I forced myself to focus on the journal again. The more I read, the more it felt like a puzzle that needed solving. I found a reference to the totem's origin buried within a mass of notes. It spoke of a tribe from a land far away, a culture that revered their ancestors and believed in spirits that lingered. The thought chilled me. Had I awakened one of them? The possibility gnawed at me. As I flipped through more pages, something caught my attention. A name, Elder Kinta. The entry described him as the last keeper of the totem before it was brought to the museum. My pulse quickened. I wondered if he could help me understand what was happening. With renewed determination, I decided to dig deeper into Elder Kinta's life. I found an older photo of him tucked inside the journal. His eyes seemed to hold stories of loss and wisdom. I felt a strange connection to the man who once protected what I now feared. I resolved to find out what became of him. I knew there had to be records. The archives might still hold traces of his history. But when I reached the back of the museum where the archives were supposed to be located, panic washed over me. The door was ajar, swinging slightly, as if inviting me in. Stepping inside, I felt an overwhelming presence. The air was thick, charged with an energy that made my skin crawl. Dust motes floated in the dim light, and the atmosphere felt heavy with secrets long buried. As I began to sift through the boxes, hoping to find anything on Elder Kinta, I noticed the silence was suddenly broken by a soft noise. It was a whisper, low and indecipherable, but it wrapped around me like a tattered shawl. My heartbeat quickened. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. The whisper ceased, but the air felt electric. That's when I saw it, a shadow darting across the room. It moved so quickly that I barely caught a glimpse, but it looked similar to the figure from last night. Was it returning? I felt a surge of fear, but my curiosity propelled me forward. I approached the spot where I thought I'd seen it, and my hand brushed against something cold and metallic. I pulled it into the light, a small charm, intricately carved with the same symbols as the totem. I gasped, recognizing the sense of history it carried. But why was it here? The air shifted around me, a rush of cold sweeping through the room. I realized I wasn't alone after all. Someone, or something, was watching from the shadows. Just as I turned to flee, the lights flickered again and went out. Everything went dark. In the silence, a voice rasped my name, and I felt something cold grip my ankle. I yanked my leg free and bolted toward the door, but the shadows surged forward. I had to get out. I had to escape the museum before it swallowed me whole. I burst through the door, breathless and terrified. My heart raced as I stumbled out into the dimly lit corridor of the museum. I leaned against the wall, desperately trying to gather my thoughts. What had just happened? The shadows had seemed alive, more than just mere darkness. The cold grip around my ankles still lingered, tightening its hold in my mind. I needed to talk to someone, anyone who could help. I glanced down the hall. Faded exhibits lined the walls, but none of them held my attention. Elder Kinta's name echoed in my mind. Where could I find someone who knew him? I turned on my heel and raced toward the main gallery. I hoped to find my boss, Mr. Hargrove. He had worked at the museum longer than anyone else, and maybe he had answers buried in his memories. As I ran, the journal clutched under my arm felt heavier, as if it too carried the weight of secrets. When I reached his office, I knocked frantically. "Mr. Hargrove, it's me," I called out. There was no response. I glanced at the clock on the wall. He should have been here by now. Panic began to creep back in. I shook my head, forcing myself to breathe. "Think," I muttered. I remembered the museum's old archives sometimes held old personal correspondence. Perhaps Elder Kinta had written something that could guide me. I hesitated, but then made the decision to try the archives again. I needed more answers. As I retraced my steps to the darkened section of the museum, I felt the chill returning. The air was thick with an unsettling presence, and each footfall felt heavy and deliberate. I stepped back into that dim room, nerves buzzing. It was quiet, but this time the silence felt menacing. With my phone as a makeshift flashlight, I began to search frantically through the boxes. Papers fluttered as I rifled through them, each one filled with faded memories of the past. I found stacks of letters, dusty photographs, but nothing that pointed to Elder Kinta. Just as I was about to give up, something glinted beneath a pile of old files. I unearthed a leather-bound ledger. It felt different in my hands. Slowly, I opened it. There, on the yellowed pages, I found his name scrawled in ink. Next to it was a date, one that rang a bell. The year written was 1967, the same year the totem was acquired by the museum. What had happened to him after that? As I read on, I found notes detailing his journeys and experiences with the totem, but one line froze me in place. "The spirits won't rest until the truth is revealed." Before I could process what I had found, a sharp sound cut through the silence. A loud crash echoed from the back of the archives. My skin prickled with fear. The shadows seemed to writhe closer, eager to envelop me. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. No one answered. That was when the lights flickered again, casting frantic shadows against the walls. I could hear whispers now, louder and more urgent. They were calling to me, beckoning. My heart thudded as I realized I was still in danger, being pulled deeper into a mystery that felt like it could swallow me whole. I needed to find a way out, but the presence felt stronger. I gripped the ledger tighter, feeling it pulse like a heartbeat. The shadows danced closer, closing in around me. I had to keep searching, but for what? And who was truly watching me? The whispers intensified, spiraling around me like a frenzied storm. I felt trapped in a vortex of sound and shadow. I had to move. I took a shaky step toward the exit, but the air thickened, making it harder to breathe. The ledger slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor, pages fanning out like the wings of a trapped bird. In that instant, a cold wind swept through the room, chilling me to the bone. I gasped, my eyes darting back to the ledger.
The whispers faded for a moment, replaced by a heavy silence that felt heavy with anticipation. I couldn't just leave it behind. "Just grab it," I murmured to myself, heart racing. I bent down to pick it up, my fingers brushing against the worn leather. But as I lifted it, a flash of movement caught my eye. A figure stood at the far end of the room, cloaked in darkness. "Who's there?" I yelled, suddenly bold. There was no reply, just a shift of shadows. I felt like I was in a dream, where nothing made sense, yet everything felt real. The figure lingered, and a sense of dread washed over me. This wasn't just my imagination. This was something alive, breathing inside the darkness. I turned to flee, but something cold brushed against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. I whirled around and came face to face with the figure. It was tall, its features indistinguishable. I stumbled back, terrified, clutching the ledger to my chest, as if it might shield me from whatever that was. "Leave this place," the figure hissed, voice echoing as if coming from a depth I couldn't fathom. My mind screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey.
Could only stand there, frozen, as the tension in the air mounted. "What do you want?" I managed to croak out, fear spilling into my voice. "I'm just looking for answers." "Answers come at a cost," it replied, the shadows swirling like a living creature around it. I could feel the oppressive weight of its words. I dared to take a step back, my flashlight beam faltering on its intangible form. "I just want to know what happened to Elder Kinta," I shouted, anger edging out my fear. "I deserve to know." In a moment, the figure ceased its movements, and silence wrapped around us again. Just as I thought I might find clarity, it raised a hand, and the lights flickered violently. I squinted, trying to focus, but everything became a haze. When the lights finally steadied, I was no longer in the archives. I stood in an eerie replica of the entire gallery, the walls splashed with vibrant colors that seemed far too alive. And there, positioned prominently, was the totem. Its gaze seemed to bore into my very soul. "What the—" I whispered, realization dawning on me. This was a memory, not my own. I watched as a younger Elder Kinta stood before it, looking just as lost as I felt. The same whispers echoed through the space, but this time they were accompanied by images of shadows swirling around him, much like what I had experienced. I needed to understand. What did all of this mean? Suddenly, the world around me shifted, and the shadows moved closer, threatening to pull me into their depths again. My heart raced. I knew I had to escape this vision, but I felt anchored to the ground. Then, I caught sight of something glimmering at the base of the totem, and as the shadows closed in, that shimmering light began to pull me toward it. I took a step forward. Whatever lay ahead would either provide the answers I needed or seal my fate forever. The moment I took a step closer to the totem, the shadows recoiled, as if sensing my intent. I reached out, feeling the heat radiating from the faint glow. Something inside me urged me forward. My fingers brushed against the glimmering object, an intricate key, adorned with symbols that echoed the ones carved into the totem. As soon as I touched it, a flood of images coursed through my mind. Elder Kinta again, but this time he was not lost. He wore a determined expression as he fashioned the key from a glowing piece of stone, channeling energy from the totem itself. I could see him entering a hidden passage behind the gallery, and my pulse quickened with the promise of discovery. But then, just as abruptly, the vision shifted. I was back in the gallery, but it felt different now, darker and more sinister. The whispers turned into agonized screams, rising to a crescendo that felt like jagged glass in my ears. The figure hovered nearby, its shadowy form pulsating with malicious intent. "No!" I shouted, clutching the key tightly as if it could shield me from the encroaching dread. "What is this place? What happened to Elder Kinta?" The figure moved closer, and the air thickened with fear. "You must choose," it hissed, the darkness swirling around it like a storm. "Will you see the truth, or remain blind to it?" I felt trapped between curiosity and terror. The key in my hand vibrated ominously. It felt like a connection to something greater, but the figure's presence loomed as a warning. I could back away, escape this nightmare, or confront whatever darkness lay ahead. "Show me the truth," I managed to say, voice steady despite my racing heart. I refused to let fear dictate my choices anymore. With that, the gallery around me faded, and the world morphed once again. I found myself standing in a dimly lit chamber, stone walls illuminated by flickering torchlight. The air was musty, filled with the scent of damp earth, and something else, something rotten. In the center of the room lay a stone altar, stained with darkened marks that suggested it had been the site of some disturbing rituals. Above it hung a tapestry depicting Elder Kinta, surrounded by shadows with eyes that seemed to glow. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a part of history, it was a warning. Behind me, the shadows twisted, forming shapes that reached towards me with claw-like hands. "You only have so long before the past consumes you," the figure warned, now behind me, the coldness palpable. I needed to act fast. Then I remembered the key. As I turned to face the altar, its shimmering surface drew me in. My instincts kicked in. I placed the key in the altar center, the symbols resonating with a hum that filled the room. Suddenly, an energy surged, and a piercing light erupted from the altar. The shadow shrieked, recoiling violently as if repelled. I took a step back, filled with a mix of hope and dread. I had awakened something. But what? That's when I heard the whispers again, but this time they felt different. They weren't chaotic, they were rhythmic, almost melodic. I could make out words now. "Release us." "Release who?" I shouted, heart racing. The atmosphere shifted again, the shadows vibrating with fury. I realized I wasn't just unlocking a chamber. I was uncovering a deeper enigma, one that intertwined my fate with Elder Kinta's and the sinister history of the place. Before I could think further, the light exploded in intensity, and I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, peering into darkness. What lay below? My breath caught as I dangled on the ledge of discovery, teetering between the shadows and the light. I teetered on the edge, the abyss below swirling with darkness. My heart pounded in my chest, a swift reminder of my vulnerability. I had chosen to confront the truth. Yet the weight of my decision pressed down on me. "What is happening?" I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. As I tried to gather my thoughts, I noticed the light from the altar fading behind me. The chamber seemed to shift, the walls pulsating as if breathing. The shadows began to creep back, their shapes writhing in anticipation. I needed clarity, quickly. I glanced back at the altar, half expecting something more. The symbols I had seen before flickered to life again. The room felt alive, and the whispers in the air intensified, urging me onward. "You must go deeper," they sang, a chant now rather than a plea. I felt an inexplicable pull towards the darkness below. It was as if the void was calling my name. Then I caught a glimpse of something, A flicker of movement at the edge of the chasm. A figure? My stomach dropped as I strained to see, but it vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. Was I truly alone, or was this part of the curse steeped in the history of this place? Elder Kinta, I murmured, recalling images of him. Had he faced something similar? I recalled his determined expression, the way he carved the key, and an urge to forge his own destiny. But how had it ended for him? Plucking up my courage, I stepped away from the edge. The shadows shifted behind me, their claws scratching at the walls like desperate hands grasping for freedom. The air grew thick with tension. I had to find a way to confront the mystery head-on, rather than remain an observer of my own nightmare. Without thinking, I turned back to the altar. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice echoing. The flames from the torches fluttered in response, casting unsettling shadows. I felt the key vibrate in my hand, hotter than before. "Open the passage," the whispers demanded, clearer now. My resolve hardened. If Kinta had hidden something here, something dangerous yet vital, I had to uncover it. I knelt before the altar again, examining it more closely. There had to be more to the stone. As I ran my fingers along the surface, I found an etching that seemed a part of the intricate design, a small round depression. The key fit perfectly. I placed it again in the altar's center, and the light flared, brighter than before. "What lies beneath?" I murmured, as the altar began to vibrate, echoing through the stone floor. And then it clicked. The altar slowly revealed a narrow, glistening path that twisted downward into the darkness. A desire intermingled with fear, pulling me forward. I felt like I was stepping into the unknown, crossing the threshold into a world that was haunted by secrets. As I descended, the shadows stirred violently behind me, their cries growing shrill. "No turning back," they hissed. But I pressed on, determined to learn and confront the truth. But just then, I felt a cold hand grasp my ankle. Froze, gasping. Someone, or something, had followed me down. The darkness was no longer just an abyss. It was alive. I jerked my foot free and spun around, ready to face whatever was emerging from the darkness. That's when I saw it. A figure was materializing, its features obscured, but I could feel its malicious energy. "Why didn't you listen?" it whispered, the darkness swirling around it. My heart sank. I wasn't prepared for what came next. The figure loomed closer, and I could feel the chill radiating off it, sharp and biting. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I took a step back, adrenaline surging through me. The shadows seemed to swirl eagerly around this entity, as if they were feeding off my fear. "Why didn't you listen?" it repeated, each word dripping with disdain. I could see its outline more clearly now, fingers elongated into sharp, claw-like shapes, its face nearly featureless, but for a pair of glowing eyes that bored into me. I felt exposed, like every secret I had was being dissected under its gaze. "What do you want?" I managed to stammer, my voice trembling. The shadows twisted closer, and I fought the urge to flee. Something told me that running wouldn't help. "Knowledge," it hissed, and for a moment I wondered if that was the truth or just a trick. "You seek answers, but answers come with a price." I straightened my back, despite the dread pooling in my stomach. "I want to know what happened to Elder Kinta," I shouted, surprising myself, "and what you are." Its laughter echoed, disjointed, like shards of glass clattering together. "You think you are ready for the truth. You are just a fragment in a greater story." The air thickened, and I felt my legs tremble beneath me. But something inside me surged forward. I would not be a mere spectator. "I'll face it, whatever it is," I declared, summoning every ounce of courage. "If Kinta could do it, I can too." As I spoke, the key in my hand seemed to pulse with energy, as though affirming my resolution. The figure tilted its head, curiosity glinting in its eyes. "Very well, then. But know this. The truth will not set you free. It will bind you even tighter to the shadows." Before I had a chance to process its words, the darkness enveloped me. The ground beneath shifted like shifting sands, and suddenly I was no longer in the altar chamber. I found myself standing in a nightmarish landscape, a dark forest, tall trees whose branches twisted like skeletal fingers against the pale light of a waning moon. Panic gripped me. How had I traversed from the altar to this forsaken place? But there was no time to dwell on it. I had to find a way out and uncover the secrets hidden here. I felt a presence behind me, and I turned to see the figure waiting just a few steps away. "Follow." It beckoned, the voice eerily calm now. "It's time to meet those who walked this path before you." I hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at me. Could I really handle what was about to unfold? With a deep breath, I stepped forward. I had come too far to turn back now. As I moved deeper into the forest, the shadows danced around me, whispering secrets that sent chills down my spine. Then a soft, haunting melody floated through the air, an invitation, a warning. I had to know more, but at what cost? The night grew thick with mystery, and the weight of my journey settled heavier on my shoulders. I had an unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. That's when I caught sight of figures in the distance, ghostly apparitions caught between worlds. And amidst them, a familiar silhouette. It was Kinta. "Are you ready to hear the truth?" he called out, his voice echoing like a distant memory. My stomach dropped as I realized I had reached the edge of a revelation far greater than I had ever anticipated. Kinta's presence sent shockwaves through me, both comfort and terror intertwining in my chest. The shadows around me thickened, clinging to my skin. I wanted to rush forward, to embrace him, but something held me back. A fear of what it meant to see him here, in this twisted realm. "Is it really you?" I called, struggling to keep my voice steady. He nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. The other figures glanced at me with hollow eyes, each face a reflection of lost moments and forgotten stories. "The truth you seek is here," Kinta replied, his voice strong, but laced with a sorrow that cut through the fog of confusion I felt. "What happened to you?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "Why did you vanish?" Kinta stepped closer, and the air shimmered with his otherworldly essence. "I ventured too far into the darkness. There are things here that you cannot comprehend yet." His gaze fell on the figure beside me, which seemed to pulsate with an energy of its own, dark and alluring. "It knows the cost." I glanced at the figure, the fear returning full force as it watched me intently. "What do we do?" I stammered, looking back at Kinta, hoping for guidance. "You must understand," Kinta urged. "Not everything here is friendly. The shadows will twist truths to bind you to their will. The knowledge you seek may not be what you desire." "And what's the alternative?" I shout back, frustration boiling inside me. "To turn back? To forget? I can't live in ignorance, Kinta. Not anymore." Kinta's expression softened. "Then you must tread carefully. Let the darkness reveal itself, but don't let it consume you. Trust your instincts. Before I could respond, the shadows around us writhed. A low growl shook the air, and the faces of the apparitions twisted in horror. I turned to see shapes forming in the darkness, curling and contorting, an army of shadows that seemed alive with malevolent intent. "Run!" Kinta shouted, reaching for my hand. But the shadows surged forward, their chilling whispers swelling around me. Instinct drove me as I began to sprint into the labyrinth of trees, Kinta beside me. The haunting melody returned, louder now, mixing with the growls and growling until it felt suffocating. Just ahead, a flicker of light caught my eye, a glimmer of hope in a landscape thick with despair. We dodged through the gloomy underbrush, branches snagging at my clothes, urging me to slow down. But I pushed through, the urgency of our escape fueling my resolve. "What's that light?" I shouted over my shoulder. "The passage," Kinta yelled back, "but we must reach it before they close in." Just then, I felt a tug at my ankle. I stumbled, almost falling, but caught myself. Glancing down, I saw tendrils of shadow curling around my feet. Panic surged again. "I can't!" "Keep moving," Kinta urged, his hand clenched around mine, pulling me forward. I willed my legs to move faster, but their grip threatened to pull me back. That's when I caught sight of it, an outline shining beneath the darkness. The passage was almost within our grasp. I could feel the heat radiating from it, a promise of salvation. But the shadows were relentless, rising like a tidal wave behind us. "Trust me," Kinta shouted as he leaped toward the light, dragging me with him. I braced myself for impact, the shadows clinging desperately. But as we crossed into the light, everything went white, and for a moment I felt weightless, as if I were being reborn. Then the light flickered out, leaving me in an uncertain void. I gasped for air, but I was no longer holding Kinta's hand. I collapsed on the cold stone floor, gasping. The air was stale, and the darkness threatened to engulf me once more. I blinked, desperate to adjust to my surroundings. I was in a small, dimly lit room, the flickering light of a single candle casting shadows along the walls. Adrenaline surged through me as I scanned the space for any sign of Kinta. "Elder Kinta," I called out, my voice trembling in the silence. A knot formed in my stomach. Had I left him behind? But when the shadows crept closer, coiling like serpents, I quickly stood, pushing the fear aside. I needed to move. The room was simple, stone walls adorned with faded tapestries depicting tribal ceremonies. In the center lay a circular altar marked with intricate carvings, its surface dusted with remnants of previous offerings. I stepped closer, tracing my fingers over the cool stone, feeling echoes of energy beneath my fingertips. As I stood there, the whispers returned, now clearer, reverberating off the walls. "The passage remains open, knowledge awaits, but beware the cost." The words twisted in my mind. Knowledge? Was this the truth Kinta warned me about? Every fiber of my being urged me to delve deeper, yet the shadows at the edges of my vision pulled tighter, a reminder of what I had just escaped. I took a cautious step back. "Kinta?" I shouted again. There was no answer, just the ominous creaking of the room settling, a reminder that I was alone. I fought to calm my breathing, focusing on the room. There had to be something here, some clue to Kinta's whereabouts or the truth about the totem. Flashes of my journey surged back to me, the unseen figure lurking in the shadows, Kinta's urging voice, the connection we had forged amidst terror. With a deep breath, I knelt beside the altar, scanning the dusty floor for any hidden compartments. Suddenly, the stone beneath my fingers shifted. I felt a small lever turn, and with a grinding noise, a section of the wall slid back to reveal a narrow passageway. An icy draft rushed to greet me, carrying with it an eerie yet intoxicating energy. My heart raced at the thought of what lay within. I hesitated, my instincts in conflict. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? To uncover the truth? But something sinister lay beneath my excitement. The whispers seemed louder now, swirling around my head, urging me forward while also warning me. Whatever secrets the darkness held could twist me into a being of despair. Summoning courage, I took a step toward the passage. "I'll find you, Kinta," I whispered, pushing the shadows aside as I entered. The darkness enveloped me, muffling sound and flickering the edges of my vision. As I traversed the cold corridor, I wrestled with doubt. Was this truly a pathway to enlightenment? Would I find answers, or only greater shadows? I could feel Kinta's absence like a wound, something gnawing at my thoughts. A choice weighed heavily on me. Where was the line between truth and madness? At the end of the passage, I emerged into a vast underground chamber, unlike anything I had ever seen. Ancient relics shimmered dimly in the faint light, filtering through gnarled roots that clawed through the stone ceiling. In the center lay an enormous stone pedestal, the very totem I had once feared, surrounded by a swirling mist. "Welcome," a voice echoed, smooth and inviting. I turned to see the shadow figure, now less menacing, but still shrouded in ambiguity. "You seek the truth." Swallowing my fear, I met its gaze. "Where is Elder Kinta?" "Lost," it rasped, the shadows swirling tighter around me. "And soon you will be too, if you choose to tread this path. But the price is higher than you realize." "I need to know," I shouted, my voice ringing with conviction. "What happened to him? What is the totem really?" The figure laughed softly, as if my desperation amused it. "To understand the past, you must embrace it fully. But do you have the strength to bear the truth? Some truths shatter the spirit." I clenched my fists, determination flooding my veins. "I am ready. Show me." With a gesture, the figure beckoned me forward, the shadows swirling at my feet. Energy pulsed through the air, and I felt the essence of the totem call to me, intertwining my fate with the past. In an instant, visions flooded my senses. Elder Kinta's memories and the sacred rites of his people. I saw the totem in its original place, revered and protected, a guardian holding back the spirits of those long gone. But something had gone wrong. A darkness had seeped into their world, drawn to the power of the totem, leading to Kinta's fateful decision to protect it by hiding it away. As the memories overwhelmed me, I felt the weight of his sacrifice, the knowledge that Kinta willingly bound himself to this darkness to protect those he loved. And in that moment, I realized my connection to him was deeper than mere curiosity. It was a shared destiny. With the flood of knowledge surging through me like electricity, I understood. I could not just escape this cycle. I had to confront it. "I won't let you keep him," I declared, finding strength I didn't know I had. "Then embrace the shadows," it whispered, reaching out with a spectral hand. "You will become one with them." The world shifted, darkening once more. Little by little, I felt the shadows pulling away, relinquishing their hold, but the price was still to be paid. Slowly, the darkness around me began to recede, not fully, but enough for a flicker of light to shine through, a promise of hope amid despair. Breathless and disoriented, I willed my feet to move, ready to forge my own path beyond this haunting legacy. "Kinta," I called out one last time, feeling his presence just beyond reach. Maybe the truth had emerged, but certainty was not granted yet. As I turned to leave the chamber, uncertainty hung in the air. Would I find my way back, or was I still lost within the echoes of shadows? I had found pieces of clarity, yet the broader mystery loomed like a storm on the horizon. I pressed on, stepping into the unknown, my heart filled with unease. But one thing was clear: the shadows would always be part of me now, and their whispers would seek to unravel me when least expected. Would I ever truly escape the past? I couldn't tell.